Okay, listeners, remember, John is at the restaurant now with Rena and his friend David. And John could not imagine what was happening with him. Let's see what happens. John, is that okay with you? Asked David. Uh, I'm sorry. Is what okay with me? You're in luck, buddy. Rena said that as a friend of mine, she would be delighted to confer about your new store here in Chicago. John wholeheartedly wanted to tell David that luck had nothing to do with any of this. While he was truly delighted that Rena would squeeze him into her busy schedule, he didn't know how in the world he could be alone with her. He put it off until he could get himself together. Wonderful. Rena, is it possible to schedule something for next week? John asked with great trepidation. Listen, John, when David told me you were a friend, I know that no matter how busy my schedule, I would accommodate you. John couldn't believe his own ears. Not only does this heavenly being have beauty, she has grace beyond anyone he has ever encountered. He just hoped that a week would be enough time for him to get himself together. How could I have ever thought of trying to hurt this precious jewel? John lamented. John had not stepped foot into a church since he and T.H. were kids. He just had to get an appointment with the pastor because for almost a week since returning from that surreal meeting in Chicago, he felt wonderfully different. He needed so many questions answered about what was happening with him. He was pleased to know that the pastor remembered him when his secretary set the date. Pastor Owens had been quite a young man himself those many years ago when he took over. He remembered John and T.H. very well because it was T.H. and his parents that the boy was always with. Those nice sunny days when he coached the children for Little League painted a puzzle picture in his mind. Being so young himself, the pastor couldn't figure it out, so he always kept the two little boys before God in prayer. Over the years, he would think about them because he believed that there was something revealing that God was trying to tell him concerning the boys. Now, after all these years, when you know that the faithfulness of God has brought the very one that needed him full circle. God had taken a special interest in the boys because Pastor Owens felt the need to write out specific prayers for each. No, he did not miss one day in praying for T.H. and John. He considered it a special, privileged assignment from the Almighty himself. So, of course, when his secretary told him the name of the person requesting an appointment, he knew that divine providence had prevailed. He'll be with you in a minute, the pastor's secretary gleamed with professionalism. It was exactly a minute later when Pastor Owens opened the door to his office. As the pastor extended his hand for a greeting, John surprised himself when he embraced the pastor with a hug. Pastor Owens, thank you so much for seeing me on such short notice. Not a problem, my son. Come right on in. As Pastor Owens closed the door, he turned to find John with his head resting in both hands. Now, my son, God is still on the throne." "I don't know about that, Pastor, because it seems like God abandoned me a long time ago. Up until last week, I have felt so alone all my life. Even with TH and I being almost brothers, it never was enough." "John, you said up until last week. What happened last week?" "That's just it, Pastor. I don't know what happened." Pastor Owens told him to take his time in explaining what was in his heart. It's interesting that the pastor mentioned heart, because before last week, John only dealt with his mind and not his heart. John had always prided himself on having a sharp mind. After all, it was his great mind that had gotten him his success, he thought. It was his astuteness of mind that had women clamoring for him wherever he went. It was also his mind that had him almost hating the best friend he ever would have. It was his mind that brought thoughts to him that he can now say he was ashamed of. When John finally came to the part about Rena to the pastor, he felt a surge through his entire body. He now spoke more at peace when talking to Pastor Owens about her. It didn't take the pastor very long to know just what had been occurring with this dear son. Chapter 6. It had been an entire day, and TH had not spoken with Elin. He was literally going crazy. He couldn't concentrate on his lines. Shooting of the film had to be postponed today because he walked off the set. The only reason he hadn't gone back to her condo and busted down the door is because he wanted to respect her wishes. He couldn't figure for the life of his very soul why she had this crazy notion about putting their marriage on hold. All kinds of crazy thoughts entered his mind. What if somehow John had wooed her away? Yeah, that's right. He had seen how John looked at her. He also knew that John had her phone number. Why would she give him the number? Oh, TH was going out of his mind. She had left him stranded with all these terrible imaginings. Where is she? Meanwhile, Elin hadn't told Rena exactly which hotel she'd be in to sort out her thoughts. She made Rena promise to give her this time without interruption. She knew that the drive to Michigan would be good for her. She checked into the penthouse suite at the finest establishment in Grand Rapids. This place was definitely just as nice as Vegas. After all, it was peaceful, serene, and beautiful. However, Vegas would forever be the most wonderful place to her because of TH. How could she not know that meeting him there had been destiny? She never even had any desire to go to Vegas. But on some funny whim, she suddenly decided to go. She could now hear Rena's voice admonishing her if she had any idea of what was happening. Get a hold to yourself, girl. You love this man. What are you doing here in Michigan? Fear. There it was again, rearing its ugly head. This had to be conquered once and for all. She would not think of doing this to TH. She would not saddle him with these hang-ups. She had to have this out with her God. She needed answers now. Each time in her life when making critical decisions, she'd get away to be with him and seek his face. Although she didn't understand why some things happened the way they did, it was still always a concern. But she knew he was still always there for her, giving her the direction she needed to take. What worked best for Elin was writing down her questions and concerns. It was as if she was testing God's attribute of being all-knowing. She would play this game with herself, thinking that instead of saying it aloud, she'd put it on paper to see if he'd answer. All of her life she had done this. Each time, the answer came in ways that were truly awesome. Again and again, the Almighty Himself never let her down. That being the case, why did this ugly fear always rear its head? Would she ever get an answer to that? Or had she gotten the answer many times, but just hadn't dealt with it? Elin knew that the part of her that studied psychology in college was always trying to rationalize. And that is what gets in the way. She tried to reason things like, this is too good to be true. Why is it that this amazing man thinks that he is in love with her? And now, is it that she is so successful? The list would go on and on until suddenly Elin would just experience a flood of knowing in her spirit and mind. Then after the consuming flood of light, there would be little signs and wonders here and there.